video afterwards? Okay, well, great. Well, thank you all. It's a pleasure to meet you. We met the first time that the session opened with the winter course. My name is Claire Dalies, not a Guatemalan name, obviously. I'm French originally, but I've been living in Guatemala basically most of my life. I came as a child and I've grown here. I'm a biologist by training, but I've worked in tourism for 30 plus years. Basically, my first job out of college was as a tour guide in the Galapagos Islands. And that opened my eyes to combining biology with tourism. And I've been in the field since then. So today I wanted to discuss with you a bit about sustainable tourism and community-based tourism. What you're seeing in my screen right now is what you were presented a few weeks ago regarding our schedule. So you've gone through a few sessions already, and then this is the first session out of a series of technical topics, okay? And I wanted then to discuss this topic with you today. I understand according to the deliverables that later on, you would be expected to have a literature review about community and sustainable tourism. So I'm not going to give you a whole lot of literature, but I'm going to give you tips and ideas and concepts today so that you will know where to look and what to look for. And definitely I'm going to be available if you need help in finding more information. Okay. I did request some, if you could answer, a short survey, and I appreciate those who actually took the time to look at the survey. It was fun reading your answers. So I'm quickly going to go through that just to share a bit of what I discovered during that short activity. And please, I'm going to ask some of you to contribute. So this was my very, very short survey. I only have 6 answers, and that's okay. It's just a starter, okay? It's a starter. So appreciate those of you who actually answered. Thank you. I have 6 answers, but to give you an idea of what you wrote, this is about your traveling experience. So let's talk about travel a little bit. So you're from different countries, and now you're in this experience learning about tourism, and you're actually going to travel together, and you're going to meet in Colombia, and this is going to be another one of your trips out of your country. Definitely you've been traveling, some of you, for the last 50 years. Okay, some of you, you've been traveling much more recently. For some of you, you're traveling this year. Okay, why not? But travel is something that is at hand. Most of you have traveled within your continents, Europe, America, and actually I separated North, Central, and South America because it's just easier to manage the information that way. But I'm not making much justice to some of the very, very large continents that you have here. But what we're seeing is that you've traveled to a lot of countries. I mean, look at the experience you have in traveling. This is going to enrich your course so much. This is just the answer of 7 people. Imagine if all 20 would have answered. It would be fantastic. But definitely you have a very rich experience in seeing different cultures, different biodiversity, different geological areas, different geography, and also you have different experiences in the types of services that you have received. The reason for travel for each of you has been different as well, although most express that you've traveled for leisure. Okay, now we're going to start talking about tourism in a bit. This is travel, what I'm asking about. Why did you travel? Okay. And some of you, most of you travel for leisure, the same as me. Some of you, because you're students and because of your age, you've traveled because you want to grow personally, and your travel is related to your study, and that's good, and that's fantastic. Some of you travel to visit friends and family. Okay, some of you have traveled because you have to work. But here are all the interesting answers. What are you looking for when you travel? And look at some of your answers. Most of you are looking to enjoy culture, past and present culture, and where you go. And along with culture, of course, you've got to eat. And I hope you enjoy the local food. Okay, so I'll show you some pictures in a few minutes to make you hungrier. Um, but it seems like we have a group that's also quite, well, interested in cities. Absolutely, that's part of culture. That's where humans live. But there's a good group of you, apparently half and half, or you're interested in nature. You're interested in adventure. You're interested in rural areas and understanding the local communities. Okay. And of course, always visiting what makes us feel tied to positive emotions. Visiting friends and family is always important. Okay. So it was good, to see why you're traveling. And look at this. What services, what products do you purchase when you travel? And it's absolutely obvious that if you go out of your house, you need a place to stay. So you need a hostel, a hotel, um, an Airbnb, somewhere where you can spend your money, but not just your money, where you can rest. That's what you really need. Of course, you need to get there. And most of you marked transportation, all kinds of transportation, mainly on land transportation, but it could be also by plane. It could be on water, depending on where you are. I mean, if you're in England and you have to go to the mainland, obviously you could go by water. You could also go by air. Um, Everybody needs to eat. So you need to go to a restaurant, a cafeteria, or purchase food. But that's normal. That's part of your everyday life. But imagine when you leave your house and you travel for leisure or any of these reasons that we're talking about, you will have to consume. You'll have to consume something because you need to keep on living. So that means you're going to spend money. Ah, and that's interesting because then we're going to talk about economics in a little bit. Okay. You also do some fun stuff. Maybe you'll go to the bar, you'll get a few drinks. Maybe you'll visit some interesting venues. You'll go to a museum. Um, Maybe you'll go to a protected area. Maybe you'll go to a natural area, a geological area. You might hire a tour guide if you want a little more information. uh, and you might buy some souvenirs. So definitely in all of this, every time we travel, we spend money. Okay. And then I wanted to show you, this was really fun. I truly appreciate those who uh, took your time to answer and to share some of your experiences. So here I'd like to get some input from some of you. Is Emma with us? Emna, are you here with us? Can you put on your
Yeah, I'm here.
great. Well, good morning. Can you tell us about this
Good
picture
morning,
that you
Claire.
put up and share with us a little bit about your experience? You have about, 30 seconds, a minute max. Tell us about this picture.
Sure. Okay, so I traveled to Mexico last year and we did this tour where you have to wake up like 4 o'clock in the morning and they pick you up at 5 o'clock and then take you to Las Ruinas de Teotihuacan. So
Uh-huh.
they park like a few minutes away from the ruins, and then you took like there is a place or a parking thing, a parking lot area that is not for cars, it's for these air balloons, and then they assign you to one of the balloons, and then they pick you up. It's like 45 minutes flight where the parking lot is to the ruins, and then you see the sunset, the sun rises in the air, so it's pretty amazing. And this tour also includes like an area where you can have a breakfast after the flight, and they take you to all of the ruins, and they like show you where like they explain everything in the ruins and what they made and what they are and what they represent for Mexico. And it was a pretty fun trip to do.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Um, I went hot air ballooning as well when I was about your age in my 20s, and it is definitely an extraordinary experience to see the world in that kind of setting. So thank you for sharing. It makes me want to travel again in a hot air balloon. Now, who else has shared? We have somebody else who put up a picture. Audun, are you with us today? Can you share about this experience?
Yeah. Yes, so this is me and my family in the outback in Western Australia. We lived in Australia for 6 months, so this was our Easter vacation, I think, a couple of years ago, 2 years ago. So this was an abandoned mine dump truck in the desert. I think was supposed to, there were like 20 of them, and they were going probably to India or something, I think. Yeah.
Well, great. How amazing. I looked at that and I had no idea. I said, you must be in a mining site or something like that because the size of the tire is just absolutely huge.
Yeah. Yeah, it was lots of, that was kind of in the mining area in northwest Australia, far
Okay,
away from everything.
great. And tell us just a bit, what is it like to travel with children
Oh,
compared
it's,
to traveling
I
alone?
mean, yeah, it's, I know it's probably not for everyone, but for us, it's fine. It's the kind of the busy to get them from kindergarten and school and eating dinner and so on. It's the same. It's not a bigger challenge if you're on vacation than you're at home. So it's, so I think everybody should do that if you like to travel. So that's
Great.
and we lived half the year in Australia and half the year in New Zealand, and the youngest one went to kindergarten there, and the two oldest went to school for half a year, and that was no problem. So,
Okay.
but of course, those countries are quite similar in a way to Norway, like Western countries. So it would for sure have been different if it was like an African country, for example.
Uh-huh. I imagine so. I imagine so. And it's interesting to analyze how people travel, who they travel with. I didn't ask that question, but I'm so pleased that you share something that's very personal to you and that you're sharing that you travel with your whole family. And definitely traveling with friends is fun, but traveling with family is what really builds those important ties. I remember as a kid, I grew up traveling. No, my dad was always a big traveler, and I think that's why I fell in love with traveling. Um, and it's wonderful as a child to have that opportunity to see the world, and it definitely expands their opportunities to learn. Um, and we have to consider that, when not just when we travel, but also when we think about tourism, who is the traveler? Who is the tourist? Who is he or she traveling with? Why? What are the needs that we have to meet? So on and so forth. Okay. So I truly appreciate you sharing this experience. Thank you. Katarina, good morning or good afternoon. Are you with us? I don't see her connected.
She was here, but I think she got some connection issues.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
she's in the jungle.
Oh, maybe she's in the jungle. Well,
Yeah.
okay. Well, she's not here, but would somebody like to comment about Katarina's picture? What do you think she's doing? And has somebody had an experience like the one she's portraying in her picture? Anybody? Raise your hand if you would like to do what she's doing in the picture.
Hi, I have connection again.
Oh, hi. Tell
Did
us
you hear
about
me?
your trip when you went to this place. Go ahead, Katarina. Try to turn on your microphone again. Tell us about your experience when you were up in that tree. Where were you?
Yes, I was in Costa Rica in a canopy biology course. So I learned how to climb trees, to set camera traps, and to research about amphibians and bromeliads.
Okay, great, great. So it's not some kind of activity that anybody can do. Definitely, this is scientific tourism. It's very specific. It's people who are actually carrying out science and they're doing it with specific equipment, but they have to travel to do that. Okay, they cannot just do it in their backyard. And I appreciate that you share that because it's a fun way to discover the world when you're doing science, and that's exactly what you're going to do when you go to Colombia. And here's my last picture. Is Angelica with us? Angelica Medina. Buenos
Hi.
días.
Buenos días.
Can you tell us about where you were and what was your experience like?
This picture is on my last travel to Europe. Is this year? Was this year? So it's really was really funny because I love historical places. So I love her and watch the Roman history. So I like a lot, and I discovered that I really love the Italian food. So
Mm,
I like, and Europe is a continent that have a lot of story in all places. So I like.
great. Thank you very much, Angelica. We all travel for different reasons. We all travel um, to discover something new. And today, this is what I'm going to talk about in the first half of this session. Let's introduce tourism and sustainable tourism. And then the second part, we'll talk about community-based tourism then. Okay, so I'd like to go through some concepts and build on what we've discussed so far, and the experiences. And I would love for you to feel free to write in the chat any comments or questions or raise your hand. Um, and we'll stop to discuss your input. But definitely we'll look at these concepts and then we'll have to analyze, like any human activity, tourism generates impacts. And we have to analyze a little bit about these impacts. We'll talk about them in a little bit, and then we'll understand why sustainability is necessary. And then finally, we'll discuss community-based tourism, okay? So talking about tourism, help me out here. What is tourism? Write it in the chat or raise your hand, but I'd love to have everybody typing quickly. What would be your definition of tourism in the chat? And then we'll read it quickly. Put it in your own words. Is tourism the same as travel, or is it different? And if it is, try to explain it in your own words in the chat. I'd be reading it in 30 seconds. Make sure that you're writing to everyone, okay? Okay, thank you, Audun. Great, so the answers are coming in. That's fantastic. Appreciate you writing some of the answers. Okay, great. Some of you are still typing. I'll let you continue typing. All right, I have 6 or 7 answers. Thank you, Hannah. Norma.
You can write in Spanish if you feel more comfortable. Claire is
Absolutely.
bilingual. It's amazing.
Well, a lot of us are bilingual, definitely. And that helps a lot. Well, great. Appreciate all your answers. This is really very enriching. So I'm going to start reading some of your answers. And forgive me if I don't get a chance to read all of your answers. I will try to read all of your comments here. So some of your ideas. Tourism is travel. And Auden says, the reason for travel is leisure. Interesting. Good. Definitely. We'll build on that. Okay. Angelica, it's travel to discover new cultures. Okay. Shasti, travel outside of your usual environment. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, you're traveling and you're not in the same area where you're at, okay? And we're building on. Definitely it's for leisure and you're discovering something new. Emna, you're mentioning it's traveling outside of your house and staying the night at another place, okay? But we have to consider why, okay? Katarina, you mentioned it's exploring new places for recreation. Thank you. Excellent. Camila Jesus, to visit places, to see places from another perspective. You know, all travel related activities is tourism. Okay. Thank you, Hannah. Norma mentions tourism is an activity to relax, to know new places and cultures, to appreciate the beauty of nature. Okay, Ruth Hernandez, tourism is seeing, I guess there's an extra S. I'm going to take the excess S there out. Tourism is seeing the world around us. Thank you very much. Lilian Galeano. Yo sonreírte. Okay, did I get it right? With the expectation of living a different experience. Okay. Muchas gracias. We have Fadia. Let's see something else that somebody else wrote in the chat as well. There we go. Respectfully visiting other countries and with curiosity, it can be for various reasons. People may travel for leisure, for knowledge, for exchange in sexual relations, so on and so forth. Thank you for your input. Yes, so there might be different reasons why people travel. Absolutely. I'm continuing to copy the answers. I'm going to take again Fadia's because it was incomplete. I'm sorry. And reading on in the chat, tourism is not just traveling, says Marco. It is social, cultural, economic phenomenon that connects people, territories, and knowledge. I like your definition, Marco. Thank you very much. It connects people, territories, and knowledge. I like the way you mention it. Okay. So I'm going to put the last definitions here. All right. All right. Thank you. Awesome. Your comments are very, very good. So you're understanding that each of your answers are complementary. Ronald, tourism is getting to know other cultures, and Galeano, great, no problem. So we look at a tourism definition, and it's going to encompass all of your definitions in a way or another, and we're going to definitely build on what your concept already is, okay, in your mind. Definitely, tourism is travel, okay? But tourism involves leaving your area of usual environment, okay? And it's a temporary movement. You're going to go and you're going to come back home. It's important because people who migrate from one country to start living in another country, that is not tourism. That is considered human migration. It can be a temporary migration in the sense that you're going to stay there a year, 2 years, or 5 years, or 20 years. But when we talk about tourism, this is a temporary travel, and when we say temporary, usually it's less than a year, it's maximum a year, okay? So if you're volunteering and you're going to volunteer for 2 years, it's not considered tourism anymore, okay? If you're volunteering for 1 month, or 2 months or 11 months, yeah, you could consider that, you know, within volunteering tourism, for instance, okay? But in order to set some variables to make it clear and more understandable, we talk about people traveling usually between 1 day and 1 year. And I'm going to go back to the concept of 1 day in just a minute. Okay. And the purposes are quite varied. All of you answered different purposes, and you're all right. Leisure is the main one, but it also can be for business. And when we say business, I don't mean work. Okay. It's not because you're going to be employed, it's for business. And business means you're going to do some kind of transaction or some kind of um, um, benefit relating to your economy. Okay. And we'll talk about the business segment, which is called MICE, in a little bit. Okay. Um, during your trip, during any tourism trip, there's always a sum of activities and services that will make your travel experience unique. And please write down and underline that tourism is within the service sector, because what the visitor, the traveler, is seeking is that experience. Why do we have to underline it? Because if you start thinking about what are the things you can propose in Ibagué, in Tolima, to help the local communities consider that this could be an interesting activity for them to offer, because it could generate income, they're going to have to build experiences. And they might not understand that. So we're going to go back to community-based tourism later on. But underline this concept of experience because it's really important. A few other concepts. The traveler, we often call tourists travelers. The difference is that the tourist is traveling for the reasons we just looked at. Okay. We may have travelers that are traveling just because they're going to work, or travelers because they're going to a meeting. Okay. So not all travelers are tourists. Okay. And if you do stay longer than a day and you're traveling for these reasons we're considering, then you're a tourist. But if you travel only for 1 day and what we call a same day travel tourist, the technical term is an excursionist. Okay, that's important to consider, especially when we consider statistics, because an excursionist will not spend the night, and therefore that's a big chunk of money that usually stays in the territory when people spend the night. Okay, excursionist is just people who come in, they visit, they spend money, they have a wonderful experience, but they go back home to spend the night. Okay, that's important to consider. This might be a new word for some of you. Okay. And then when we talk about the usual environment, it's important to consider that term, please. When we say the usual environment, we refer to the place where the people work or live. Okay. And if you have two homes and you go from your main home to your secondary home, which is right by the beach, that's not tourism. You're just going home, right? But you have a secondary home. So that would not be considered tourism. Again, the purposes of the trips can be quite variable. Some are legal and some are illegal. But the purposes vary quite a bit. Okay. Now, some important terms to understand, and maybe these are new terms for you. When we talk about domestic tourism, we talk about all the travelers that are within a country or within a region, and they travel within that country or region. Okay, that is domestic tourism. And usually we talk, the reference here, the geographical reference is the country. Okay, so domestic tourism in Norway is residents in Norway who may be Norwegians, or who may be foreigners who reside in Norway. When they travel within Norway, that's domestic tourism. Okay. Same in Colombia, same in Guatemala. When we are resident in a country and we travel within that country, that's domestic tourism. Okay. Now, inbound tourism is anybody who is not from that territory, who does not reside in the territory and they travel into that territory. That is called inbound tourism. En español nos referimos a este turismo como turismo receptivo. ¿Ok? Para que conozcan el término técnico. Turismo receptivo es inbound tourism. ¿Ok? And outbound tourism is all the residents in a country who decide to travel outside the country. So they're not visiting inside. If they visited inside, it would be domestic. But if they decide to visit outside the country, it's this little arrow or black arrow going out. They're going outward. Okay. So it helps us understand a little bit the types of people who are traveling. Now, let me ask you a question. And again, we're going to use the chat for this. Let's consider Norway, Guatemala, and Colombia. I have the data for Norway and Guatemala. I don't have it for Colombia. Maybe the Colombians are going to help me. What would be the ratio of domestic to international or foreign tourism, which in the end is going to be inbound tourism, right? In each country. Okay, and we're talking about economic, if we compare the economic benefit that tourism generates. Okay, we're looking at a ratio, at a percentage. Okay, that's the question I'm asking you in the chat. Try to analyze what I'm asking you. Let's see, in terms of economic benefit, do you think that you in Norway benefit more from your internal domestic tourism compared to your inbound tourism? Those who are in Norway, who are in a region, what would be that percentage? Any ideas? For those who are in Guatemala, what would it be? And Colombia, what would it be? Or in general, just tell me, and you can raise your hand or you can write in the chat. Do you think that overall at an economic level in our countries, do we make more money by domestic tourism compared to international tourism? Is it 50-50? Is it 80-20? What do you think? I don't see raised hands. Okay, anybody wants to take a guess before I give you the answer? Go ahead, Ruth. I'm listening.
En Spanish.
En español, adelante. Yo te escucho y traducimos después.
Ok, no sé si entendí bien la pregunta de que económicamente si hacemos turismo interno se beneficia, hay más beneficio económico en nuestro país. ¿A eso se refería?
¿Cuál sería la proporción del turismo doméstico en comparación al turismo internacional en tu país? Me
Bueno.
refiero, por ejemplo, en Colombia, ¿sí? Y la pregunta sería, ¿será que tienes me voy a inventar, 60% turismo interno versus 40% turismo internacional? Turismo interno o doméstico. Okay. What would be your guess?
Angelica put in the chat 50-50.
Ajá. Gracias. Thank you. I wasn't looking at the chat. It helps me a lot if you read it.
I'm here
Okay,
to
so
assist
in
you.
Colombia, you're thinking 50-50. All right, in Colombia. less than 25% of Colombians can do tourism domestic. Okay. Due to the local economy in Colombia, we have more international visitors. Okay. Your answer is based on number of travelers. Okay. My question and the way we look at the proportion is we're looking at the income, at how much money is moved within the country. Okay. So in terms of numbers of visitors, yeah, you might be completely right. Okay. But we do look at numbers of visitors and we measure it, especially economically. Okay. So
Okay,
in
Adun is
Colombia,
saying that
70%.
Adun is saying 3-1 in Norway. Is a good guess.
Okay, great, great. So yeah, this is for Colombia. Yes, probably your numbers are going to be around 70-30. And the correct answer for Guatemala is exactly that. Okay, 70%. Oh, no. It's the reverse in Guatemala. To give you in Guatemala, we have 70%. It's domestic tourism. That's in terms of income, okay, versus 30% is international tourism, okay? And for Norway, the data we got when we were there, we talked to people in Visit Norway, and they say 80% it's domestic tourism in terms of income, okay?
Oh, we got a winner here.
All
Yasmin is
right.
completely right. 80% domestic and 20% international.
Yes, thank you, Shasti. You got it right. Okay. So it's interesting. What we're trying to see and understand here is that oftentimes domestic tourism may not be in numbers, it's not as much. Yeah. But it can represent a tremendous movement in the local economy. Okay. In some countries that depend almost solely on tourism for their economy, it can be the reverse. For example, I think about some of the Caribbean islands, okay, like República Dominicana, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, okay. Some of these islands, their economy depends almost solely on tourism. Probably their domestic tourism is really, really low, okay? And it's probably going to be a 20-80 in the reverse of what we see in Norway, okay? Yes, Chastity, thank you for your comment. Thank you, Fadia. But it's important to understand those numbers and to understand also what's happening in terms of economic movement and people movement, okay? Let's continue. What happens with domestic tourism versus international tourism is that in domestic tourism is the local residents. You know, it can be national and foreigners who are actually living in the country that are traveling within the country, and it promotes that local business. It's usually pretty simple to work on marketing for that group for domestic tourism because it's the locals selling to local population. Okay, and therefore they understand each other better. Usually it's the same language, usually it's the same culture. It definitely supports that national unity, okay? And it doesn't require any formalities or documents to travel. So it's really easy to travel. And in every country we have strong domestic tourism. It's also very marked with specific dates. Usually holidays represent a tremendous raise in domestic tourism, okay? Compared to international tourism. International tourism is when we have foreigners traveling into our country. It definitely generates that foreign income, you know, those usually we talk about US dollars, you know, none of our countries depend on the US dollar economy, but That is the currency that helps us at least understand our currencies. Okay. So it brings in that foreign money. It can be much more costly and hard to promote and to manage because we want to invite people who are not of the same culture. Probably they don't speak the same language we do. And it takes a lot of knowledge about those foreign visitors. We need to understand them to sell to them. Okay. If we don't understand them, we won't be able to sell to them. Okay. And in terms of maintaining international friendships, that is very positive because it strengthens ties between countries. And it's not political ties, it's really ties between people, friendships. I like the way they put it here in the text. It maintains those international friendships. And of course, it needs to be regulated. So we're going to have certain formalities and documents using passports, so on and so forth. Okay. Ranko, there's a question. Do we see a trend over time in the movement from domestic versus inbound in those countries? Well, let's analyze the question together. Thank you for your question. Okay. What do you think? Has there been a change in domestic versus inbound or international tourism in your countries? If we
So the
look,
reason that I ask Claire is that what I see in, for example, in the Netherlands,
yeah,
the trend is that when I was young, we had domestic holidays. We didn't go out of the country. We went camping like maybe Norwegians knows we go out with our camper van or whatever, but we stay in the country. But I see my family and friends are going more international. So they have more money, they have more times on holiday. So I was wondering if there's a trend to see that people are maybe moving more to outbound holidays in those countries like Guatemala, Colombia, based on economical growth.
yes, we'll look at the data in just a few minutes. And definitely if we look over decades, if we compare decades, yes, we will see that. And I'll show you. Actually, we can jump very quickly. No, I'm not going to jump quickly to that, but I'll show you a graph that over the last 40, 50, 60 years, definitely we see that there's more movement towards traveling outside the country. Okay. However, there are certain crises that make us stay home, and the pandemic was one of those. Okay, so we're going to analyze the pandemic quickly and see that, even if we cannot travel outside the country for one reason or another, like the pandemic stopped us from traveling for a while. Okay, definitely domestic tourism can continue, and domestic tourism can maintain the economy of a country. Okay, in the case of Colombia, a country that had an internal war for many years. Guatemala as well. We also had our internal conflict for 36 years. Definitely during those times of war, international tourism was almost nil, okay, or very low. But domestic tourism continued, okay, and that domestic tourism is the one that continues moving the local economy, okay. Okay, Shasti, you mentioned, well, I know at least that since the Norwegian krone was weaker now, is weaker now. So for example, there's a lot more tourists from Spain rather than before, okay, now compared to before. And at the same time, people in Norway usually choose Norwegian holidays due to several reasons: climate change, heat waves, and so on. And also, that's more expensive to travel abroad now. Yes, you're right. So those trends may change because tourism depends on a lot of external factors. People travel if the opportunities are there, and they will spend if they can, and they will spend less if they cannot spend as much as before. Okay. Norma is writing, in Colombia, the economic growth definitely has an impact on people's ability to travel. Speaking of tourism in general, internally, security conditions in certain regions also allow for an increase in tourism. Okay. Great and interesting. And I appreciate your comments in the chat. Okay, let's move on. These are the main movements that were documented. Look at my reference. This is 30 years ago. Okay, 1998. Most of the travel used to be like that. It is still tends to be like that, although now there tends to be quite a bit of travel also from South America to Central and North America, or there's more and more South Americans traveling to Europe. Okay, it's not just from north to south as you're seeing in this map. Okay, so definitely the trends have changed over time. 2017, we're looking at almost 10 years ago. Okay, France was the main destination, followed by Spain and the United States, and then China. China ranked really high before the pandemic. Today, China is not even in the top 10. Okay, so it's interesting that even the destinations are changing, and what's happening around the world is in constant movement. Look at the top 10 destinations of worldwide. This is where France is always in the top. It's surprising how this country continues to be the country where we record the highest number of international arrivals, 102 million.
Because
Okay.
they have the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, and many other things. Okay, but Spain usually follows immediately behind. The United States is right there. Okay. Mexico appears on the list. This is really interesting. Okay, Turkey is pretty high, you know, Mexico, Germany, and then Japan has become an interesting destination worldwide. Greece, Thailand, and Austria. Okay, notice how in 6, 7, 8 years, you know, the main destinations have changed, and you have to keep on understanding how those decisions are made. Okay, I appreciate again the comments in the chat because you're analyzing what's happening in the countries and what allows people to travel more or less to a different destination. Shasti, you're asking, is it based at the airport, like planes landing? Because there are a lot of transition planes in France too, so that people land but do not visit. Thank you for your question. Let me explain to you. The data you see here is what we call international arrivals. Okay, it's based on a data that is considered international arrivals. Okay, and we measure international arrivals at airports, seaports, and at the borders, land borders. Okay, and that is measured right there. Okay, if you are flying on transit and you're just landing and taking off a few hours or days later, that is not considered. Okay, so we're looking at the migration records on passports. Okay, and this data is given by the immigration office of each country. It's given to the tourism office in the country, from immigration to tourism, and then tourism office then sends it out to probably UN Tourism or the World Tourism and Travel Council. Okay, they're the ones that record the information that I'm presenting to you at this time. Okay.
But Claire, in the European Union, you don't need a migration, right?
Yes, and definitely there's travel within Europe, and especially the
With
Schengen
our
space.
borders.
Yeah, usually it's pretty easy. You can just go through. It's based on general records of how many people are passing through, because there is some kind of way to count. But it's not surprising that usually in Europe is where we see the most travel records. And that's
Right.
because the borders are fairly close. And also there's the facility in terms of transportation to travel from one country to another. Okay.
And is France so high because it's around the year? For example, they have winter sport, they have summer around the year they attract a lot of people to come within Europe, but also outside of Europe to go skiing or go to the beach in summer.
Mhm.
Is that the reason
Yes.
that they are in the top one, in the top
Yes.
10?
I mean, the reason why France is in the top one is for many reasons, and we're going to look at the motivation in just a few minutes. But France offers a lot of different reasons to visit France, as well as it's also between Spain uh, and Portugal and the rest of Europe. So anybody who wants to travel and they don't want to fly, you know, they might go through France. But definitely, it's location as well as its attractions. You know, make it interesting. Okay, let's move on a little bit faster. And hang on, because I'm gonna go really fast right now. Or here's a bunch of pictures just for you to enjoy. Why do you travel? So let's look at reasons for traveling. Okay. People travel because culture is interesting. Okay. And these are a few pictures of places in Guatemala. It can be ancient history, archaeological sites. It can be recent history. It can be architecture. It can be something interesting in the way people behave. Okay. It can be for um, spiritual reasons, or it can be anything that has to do with people and their culture has been the main reason why we travel. And then cultural tourism is just a huge area. It can be subdivided. One of the main reasons within cultural tourism, we could call it also gastronomy. That can be a main reason to travel. Okay. Every country has a rich gastronomy. And I hope that you enjoy the gastronomy of each place you go to. Aquí abajo, para los que son colombianos, díganme qué es esa olla deliciosa que se mira abajo a la izquierda. What are you looking at? Ahí los colombianos, pónganme qué es eso.
Sancocho.
Sancocho. Aha. So the Colombians recognize there's special dish that I hope you're going to eat it when you're in Colombia. Sancocho. Okay, and then you have a few dishes from Guatemala, and then you have salmon. But I'm sure there's lots of wonderful dishes in each country for you to discover. Okay. But nature is also an important reason why people visit and why people travel. It can be nature related to the territory, mountains, volcanoes, lakes, waterfalls, rivers, activities outdoors, okay? It can also be to visit how humans live outside a city, and that's what we call rural tourism, okay? And it can be related to communities, or it can be in a private farm, okay? But anything that is outside a city, we will consider that rural tourism. Outside the cities is also where we have agriculture. And in Colombia and Guatemala, coffee is the main crop. So agricultural tourism has grown a lot around coffee tours. But in Europe, you know that the main agricultural tour is wine tours. And it goes along with visiting the crop as well as tasting the product, okay? Enotourism. That's very specific to that region worldwide, okay? We can also talk about outdoor sports and adventure. People who want to be outdoors, but not necessarily to enjoy biodiversity. It's more to enjoy the activity they're going to do outdoors. Okay. It tends to be a tourism segment for younger people compared to older travelers. Okay. Now, some people travel to participate in sports or to watch sports events, you know, the Olympics, Le Tour de France, or a marathon. You know, any of those events also attract and move millions of travelers. And then some people travel because they want to donate their time. And voluntary tourism is really interesting. That is growing dramatically in a lot of our developing countries because people want to come and share an unforgettable experience and feel useful. Okay. They might stay a few days, they might stay weeks or months. Some people come because they have a medical background, or they have a agricultural background. They will work with the people and serve the people. That this is a really interesting segment of tourism. It doesn't generate a whole lot of economic benefit, but it generates a tremendous social benefit. Okay. Ecotourism, this is a term that has been out of use. It was born in 1970s, used a lot in the 1980s and 90s. And basically this ecotourism, the idea was very much like nature-based tourism, but combining also the local populations and the relationship of those populations with their environment. Okay. So it's a form of rural tourism, but it has some additional things. It needs to involve education, it needs to involve conservation, and it needs to involve also socioeconomic benefits for the population. Okay. And then this is an interesting segment. I'm not portraying all the segments, I'm just giving you a few of those. But for those of you who have traveled to a congress, to a convention, you have participated in what we call MICE. MICE is this tourism segment that encompasses travelers who travel to meetings, incentives, conventions, or go to exhibits. Okay. And this is a huge, huge industry. It's often related to hospitality industry, and people travel for a very, very short time for whatever they need to do in that meeting. And then they may take a few hours or days off additionally to participate in any other segment. Okay. What I do want to show here is that travelers may travel for one main reason, but usually they participate in different other tourism segments, and their motivations can be multiple. The main ones are that if we separate them in terms of segments, there's an urban tourism segment and a rural tourism segment. Urban is in cities, and rural is outside the cities, where mainly it's going to be nature, the main place that they're going to hang out. Okay. All of nature and wildlife tourism is going to happen within rural areas. Okay. But cultural tourism, you're going to have a good chunk of cultural tourism in cities. But part of cultural tourism occurs in rural areas, especially if we want to include their gastronomy and other things. Archaeological tourism can be also inside cities or outside a city. Okay, if you have an archaeological site, it can be inside or outside. Okay, if we're looking at outdoor adventures, okay, all of that is going to happen in rural areas. Community-based tourism. This is a type of tourism that is only in rural areas, but it is both an interest for cultural tourists as well as nature tourists. Okay, and gastronomy will be related, you know, to that cultural-based tourism as well as cultural tourism. And then I'm putting ecotourism as a big circle, because ecotourism can encompass all of these different types of tourism. Okay. Now let's consider tourism impacts, and I'm going to go quickly through some of this data so that you can have it, and then we'll go through questions. If you have questions, please write them in the chat and we'll discuss them. Over time, over the last decades, okay, and answering Ranko's questions, tourism has increased. And what you're looking at here is international tourist arrivals received in millions of people traveling, okay? Now, please consider that these are international arrivals, not international tourists. That's the difference, because you as a person, you may go in and out of your border 5 times in a year, and you're going to be registered as 5 international arrivals, okay, compared to 1 person, okay? But what you see here is that there's a general trend in growth The more humans on Earth, the more travelers we have. So definitely tourism is going to continue because after all, tourism is a movement of people who want to discover the world. And it may be stopped by an event. And definitely we all experienced this event like the pandemic 5 years ago. It didn't stop tourism completely. Okay, it dropped 60 to 70%, okay, in international arrivals. But honestly, tourism in general is a very resilient activity. Within 4 or 5 years, it recuperated. Look here, we had a crisis and it recuperated. We had another crisis and it recuperated. And here we have the biggest crisis in travelers worldwide, but it's recuperating. Okay, and now 2024, 2025, in terms of numbers of travelers worldwide, we're going to be probably higher than 2019. And in terms of economic impact, okay, here you have numbers of travelers. So we're talking about 1.5 million travelers worldwide. That's one out of 8 humans are traveling worldwide. And this is a $1 trillion economy. Okay? It's a $1 trillion economy. That's 1,000 billion. That's what it means. It's 1 with 9 zeros behind it. Okay? It's a huge economy. And notice that we have already recuperated economically. We're 4% over 2019. And that's because the impact on the economy is huge. Okay, our supply chain is very, very long. And you can spend money in each of these different areas. Okay. So definitely you will be spending, maybe an average of $80, $100, $120 a day. Okay. But you'll be spending in different areas and that leaves a lot of money everywhere. Okay. So it corresponds to about 10% of the GDP, 1 out of 10 jobs. Okay. And again, it's a huge, huge economy, but it also generates enormous impacts. And these are just human impacts of any kind of activity, but tourism can make it worse. Trash, solid waste, liquid waste, air pollution. Tourism, especially transportation, is what contributes the most to air pollution. And we're talking about 8% of our global greenhouse gases emission are due to transportation. And it's mainly 5% is due to avian transportation. Okay. Cultural impact. Architecture is damaged. Heritage is damaged. Social behavior is changed. Even animal behavior has changed. Over-tourism is just a concern. So we need to consider those impacts and we need to start measuring those impacts. Okay. And what sustainable tourism is basically a management system. It is not a tourism segment. When we talk about sustainable tourism, it's a way to manage tourism so that any kind of tourism segment can be managed in a way that will last a long time. So when we talk about sustainable tourism, we're talking about the kind of tourism that considers those impacts. It takes into account the impacts at an economic, social, and environmental level. And it addresses the needs of the visitors, but not just the visitors, also those who are in that supply chain, and of course, the host communities in the environment. Okay. You've seen this triple bottom line drawing. Okay, you know that it's people, planet, and profit, but I don't like it as much as consider it this way. if we want to aim at sustainability, we have to consider probably that we need to have a business that is economically sustainable, and then that has a positive social impact, and then that generates a positive environmental impact. And that comes out of this book in 2005 called Making Tourism More Sustainable, a book that's interesting looking at and considering. However, the standards for sustainable tourism didn't start with UN Tourism in 2015 with all the sustainable development goals. Standards in tourism start about 20 years ago with an organization called the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. And you really need to look at this website because this is an international organization that is private, but they're the ones who develop those standards for hotels and accommodations, for tour operations, as well as destinations. And now they're moving towards other areas as well, okay? And they're validated by UN Tourism as well. Please consider that responsabilidad social empresarial, or corporate social responsibility, is part of sustainability. But sustainability is so much more, okay? So you have to consider that, okay? You will find a lot of information online in terms of the relationship between tourism and SDGs. And there's a whole platform that talks about how tourism can contribute to SDGs, these Sustainable Development Goals. Although only 3 Sustainable Development Goals mention explicitly tourism, okay, sustainable tourism can impact positively all 5 areas: people, planet, profit, peace, and alliances, okay? And the trend right now, it's towards not just sustainable tourism, but you're going to have to look into what regenerative tourism is, okay? And this regenerative tourism is really being very intentional about how to give better positive impact compared to just managing, you know, those negative impacts. Okay, so this is a general trend overall, and it's because our socio-ecological systems are being damaged very quickly, and sustaining life as it is right now is not going to be enough. We need to restore and regenerate. So this is a general trend worldwide, and tourism is not exempt of that trend. Okay, I'm going to move quickly to community-based tourism, but I just wanted to see if there's any questions or comments about what we've shared so far. And I know I'm short of time. Marco, you mentioned in small towns, everyone wants the economic benefits of tourism, the generation of income. However, tourism brings more visitors associated with waste management. There are towns that have high water quality risk index for human consumption. You're absolutely right. And there's no concern on part of the municipal administrations to improve the service infrastructure. Thank you for your comment, and you're absolutely right. And that is part of the challenge, okay? And now that we're going to move towards community-based tourism, it's the best kind of tourism when the whole community is involved, okay? And when we look at community-based tourism, the community is involved because the community wants to be involved in this economic activity, okay? And it needs to consider all the actors, okay? So quickly, from a tourism perspective, CBT, or community-based tourism, is going to be a tourism management model that puts the local community at the center of the process, and that encompasses a diverse style of and forms of tourism. All the segments that I mentioned can be included in CBT, okay? But it is about community empowerment. It is a decision of the community, okay? And this is a community process, okay? I want to look also at the anthropological perspective. And if we look at the anthropological side, definitely it's a decision that the communities make because they consider a tourism that's based in the community an opportunity for development where they have ownership of the tourism development, okay? Where the community is not just object of tourism, it is subject of tourism. It owns the tourism services. It owns the well-being of the people, and they manage their tourists movement. They manage the information that they offer. They have guided tours, they have homestays, they have workshops, there's a collective ownership. They manage together their natural and cultural attractions, okay? And it really, really strengthens the community. In terms of characteristics, governance is key. The community is empowered and the community has control. And the only way that happens is through governance. That word is not written here, and you need to take note. Governance is key for it to happen. And governance is a difficult thing to achieve, okay? The reason why Marco mentioned in the chat that there's that huge problem of waste management, water waste management, is because there is poor governance locally, okay? Also, in community-based tourism, the community keeps its own culture and offers an authentic relationship with the visitor and the local culture, their traditions, their ways of life, okay? And definitely this cannot be a mass market tourism because we are linking people. We're connecting people with culture. People want to spend time. It's very experiential. It must generate economic benefits. The jobs are within the community and they're managed by the community. The culture is preserved. The environment is also controlled and preserved because the locals know that they need to conserve their environment. Otherwise, they will lose their natural resources. So they need to be very careful about what they use, how much they use, okay? And definitely the local livelihood can increase and the social impact can be positive, but it needs to be controlled because if it gets out of hand, then probably then the negative impacts start being felt and measured, okay? And finally, education is key, both for the visitors and for the community members, okay? When all of this happens, then you have a really good community-based tourism. And the key in the discussion is going to be on how are you going to achieve it? And this is the key. I really recommend you look up this website on community-based tourism. Planning is going to be key. Managing and empowering the local decision makers so that they can have that great governance, will allow them to use tourism as an economic activity that can help them, in improving their social livelihood, okay? But it takes quite a bit of time to go through the planning, the management, and the governance development. This is the key of how we're going to make it, and this is where we're going to be working the most at in the next few classes, okay? So I'm going to stop here because of time, and then just take any comments or questions that you may have.
Thank you, Claire. It was really interactive, and please share your slides into the
Sure.
Google Classroom. We have a few minutes left for those who really wants to have a quick chat. Otherwise, you can reach Claire in the WhatsApp group if you
Yes.
need some more consult on this topic. But is there anybody that is willing to share something that you maybe want to ask or take away? Don't be shy.
Okay, Marco, you wrote there, one of the topics that seemed most interesting to me in CBT is this decision-making capacity of the communities to bet on tourism as a life opportunity. Governance is key and we must persist. In small towns like Murillo in Tolima, the phenomenon of gentrification is occurring and some residents are selling their homes and leaving. We all want the benefits of tourism, but it is a multidisciplinary approach. Absolutely, yes. and that is not that it and that it is not foreign investors who end up making decisions about the people and the territory. Gentrification is a topic you're going to have to look up, research, and discuss. Gentrification is basically a social situation where foreigners from an area, they can be from the same country, but they're not original from an area. These foreigners come in and there's something that makes them attracted to the territory. It's pretty, there's an economic opportunity, they have people nearby, and they start moving in. But they move in and they don't live outside, they live inside, and they start purchasing land and they start purchasing houses. And those who are inside, they're like, okay, well, I need money, and they're offering me a good price. All right, maybe this can help me. So they start selling. This is the result of an area that is so nice and has such great opportunity that foreigners are moving in.
Okay.
The locals are starting to move out, but not due to an obligatory pressure. Voluntarily, they're moving out, but the prices start raising up. Okay, so it's a very complex situation. It happens a lot with tourism, especially in areas where it's not planned and it's not measured. Okay, if we have DMOs that are working properly, DMOs are destination management organizations. En español son OGDs, organizaciones gestoras de destinos. If DMOs are working properly, then gentrification can be avoided. If DMOs are not there, it's going to be really difficult. Okay.
Okay. Adum, you had something to share?
I just want to say thank you for a very, very nice lecture and also very engaging. So just thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Ronald.
I took up a little too much of your time, but I was looking forward to sharing this with you.
Again,
Okay,
Ronald.
sorry, I don't speak English. I can
No,
speak
speak
Spanish.
It's okay.
Claire,
Ronald, adelante, por favor, habla en español. Le escucho.
gracias. Claire, solamente una pregunta. Muchas gracias por toda la presentación. Pero una pregunta, y es referente a lo último que comunicabas, frente a la gentrificación rural. ¿Cómo se puede afrontar la gentrificación rural para las comunidades que están experimentando estos temas de turismo y tienen que competir con las grandes cadenas de hoteles y que llegan a sus territorios e incrementan los costos de vida? Gracias.
Buena pregunta. Lo mencioné hace un momentito y te lo contesto en español. Es necesario que haya una organización en el destino y que haya una organización que defina cuál es la visión del destino. Okay. So if there is an organization in the destination that is overseeing everybody's interests, like a destination management organization, una organización gestora de destino, that organization can take into account everybody's interests. The challenging part is organizing them. It's organizing the people. That is always the most challenging part, is how do you organize people? So if it's a small community and the community is very tightly knit and the people take decisions together quickly because there's a collectivity that is really valuable to them, probably gentrification is not going to happen because they're going to oust those foreigners. They're not going to let them in. But if the community is not tightly knit, si la comunidad no está unida, when the community is separate and people take individual decisions, then they're looking after their own well-being and they're not looking after the collective well-being. That is the biggest challenge. So the more collective associations, the better the protection against gentrification. Yes, Marco.
In Spanish.
En español.
En el Líbano, Tolima, un municipio hacia el norte, hay plan de desarrollo turístico.
Sí.
El destino es naturaleza especificado con énfasis en avistamiento de aves.
Fantástico.
Fontour lo financió hace mucho tiempo. pero el plan estuvo tan alejado de la comunidad que fueron solo talleres que no está apropiado. Y hay una débil base comunitaria. Hay mucha comunidad, hay inversionistas, pero hay una débil base comunitaria. Entonces, lo clave acá, a veces más que el gobierno tiene unas capacidades y tiene también, digamos, unas exigencias hasta constitucionales y legales, es que la comunidad esté organizada. Y ahí es donde, en nuestro caso como academia, insistimos mucho y persistimos en apoyar a la generación de capacidades colectivas con las organizaciones de base y con las comunidades para que puedan enfrentar, porque si la comunidad no está unida, pasa, Ronald, lo que está sucediendo. O bien en grandes em, cadenas hoteleras o como las comunidades ni siquiera tuvieron la oportunidad, porque hacia el norte también en el Murillo, Tolima, hay
Ujú.
una vía de alta montaña que está pasando. Las comunidades no tuvieron ni siquiera la capacidad de organizar y elegir si el turismo era una de sus, querían ser unas fuentes de ingreso porque toda su vida habían sido granjeros, habían sido campesinos y han sido básicamente paperos, han sembrado papa.
Ujú.
Entonces tenemos turismo de alta montaña en una zona de reserva y en este caso la comunidad no ha estado, digamos que ahorita sacaron un plan de desarrollo turístico hermoso, supremamente comunitario, pero digamos que se está trabajando en la formalización, en poder unir la comunidad y eso es clave, incluso más allá que la misma administración municipal o alcaldía. Es clave,
Ujú.
clave, clave, clavísima la organización comunitaria. Y allí nosotros que
Absolutely.
nos estamos formando está la clave, creo yo. Muchas gracias.
I completely agree with your comment, Marco. You're right on. And that's going to be the biggest challenge because I don't think any of you are really studying that. You're studying economy, sustainable management, ecology, whatever you're studying, but you're not focusing on conflict resolution, and you're going to have to learn about that. You're not studying specifically about human relations, and after all, that is what you're going to have to focus on is human relations.
Exactly, Mento. Thank you so much, Claire, for your time and for your sharing, and everybody. One note for all the groups, I moved the deadline for checkpoint 2. If you need any feedback from your checkpoint 1, please reach out to your mentor to get some first insights on your introduction. Yeah. So I moved the deadline for checkpoint 2 for your literature review. Claire mentioned 3 readings. Please use them for your literature review. And I see you next week with Senor Luis, who's sharing about the next topic. Have a beautiful day and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you all. Take
Thank
care. It's good to see you.
Thank
Chao,
you.
nos vemos.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Muchas
Thank you.
gracias.
Bye.